Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our podcast. Good morning, Jessica. Ramy had to be gone this morning. And a great big welcome to our guest, Fran Caudron. I'm sorry, I should have Caudron or Caudron?
Caudron. Caudron.
Cadron. Okay, thank you for telling me. I should have asked you before, so I apologize for that. And I'm going to read her biography here. And pull that up. And again, I wasn't thinking ahead this morning and I didn't have it pulled up right here. So it won't take me long. And Fran Caudron spent a 34-year career as a highly skilled, creative, and motivated master elementary educator in Northern Alberta, Canada, from which she has recently retired. And so, congratulations on your retirement, Fran.
Thank you, Carla.
Yeah, you bet. It's been 25 years since Fran experienced intense internal spiritual growth through surrendering to a 12-step program of recovery, and she furthered her growth with a master's in religious education. She is a trained hypnotherapist, and in her weekly vlog called Hopenning, she interviews authors and healers who promote hope and inner spirit healing. Today, Fran thrives by creating an attitude and environment of gratitude, resilience, and forgiveness. And with all that's going on in the world today, wow, that is needed for sure, isn't it? She teaches pre service teachers from Indigenous and other backgrounds in a University of Alberta online classroom and continues to promote recovery through her work with the 12 steps and by healing the inner child. And she leaves her website information below that you can contact her on or check out her work. It's called inhealtherapy.com. And Fran, I'm so glad you could join us today. And would you tell us, please, a little bit about your personal story, yourself, and how you came to um, learn more about the 12-step program and how you come to do the work you're doing?
I'd love to. And thank you, Carla and Jessica, for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. And so we could start from the very beginning. So I
Okay.
kind of, how you have to frame everything. So in order to know why we got here, we need to look back, right? And
Yeah.
so the events of my childhood, my young adulthood, and now where I am right now really did frame the person that I am. And like I said in my bio, you always have to look back at with gratitude, because without the events that happened before, you can't have made the gains and the steps and the challenges that create in you who you are right now. So I was born into a farming family. My parents were immigrants. So my father immigrated when he was 4 years old from a country that was called Czechoslovakia at that point. It's no longer called Czechoslovakia, it is now just Slovakia, but he was only four. His parents both were poor, right? And at that point, Canada was pretty much giving away land in here in Western Canada to farmers who would be able to farm it. So they could see that there was a future in Canada. And my grandparents came across, both sets of grandparents came across and raised their children here in Canada, but they were English as a second language. So life was tough for them. My father he was, he went to school only until the age of 12. So at 12 years old, he became the main caretaker, breadwinner for his home, as his father was no longer in the picture. And so they really had a work ethic. Like these immigrants, they cared about work, 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 work. So fast forward, my parents got married. They both were Slovak people and married and had 12 children. So I'm the 10th, right? I'm the 10th child of 12. And one of the things that is super interesting, Marissa Peer, who is my mentor for the rapid transformational therapy hypnotherapy talks about how birth order, really, there are 4 different types of children. And if you've got a large family like I have, you can really see these 4 different types. You'll have a high achiever, usually followed by a rebel, followed by a kind and caring one, followed by a one who's often very sick. So in my big family, that, now that I can see it, I can see how that all played out, right? And because I was the 10th in the family, all of those roles had been taken.
Right.
So, but I was born right after a very sick girl. My sister was very sick very often. And then my younger sister was a premature baby. She was 2 months premature. So I was stuck in between. So I became the kind and caring one in order to get attention in my family. Kind and caring. That's how I could get attention. So I grew up very quiet. My dad was quite emotionally, verbally, and physically abusive. Um, so I stayed quiet all the time. You just do your work, head down, just do your work, and don't make problems, don't cause trouble, because there was enough of that already by the siblings who took that role. And so, yeah, I was the kind and caring one, and very accepting. Fast forward into my marriage. I married a man who I thought was so different from my dad because he wasn't that hard work ethic, and he liked to hang out and party and that kind of stuff. But little did I know, with my background experience, that he was so much like my dad in different ways. Um, my dad was not an alcoholic. But he did like to go out on a Saturday night with his friends and have a few beers. He did like to do that. But my husband started out that way. So for me, that was a very familiar rut, to have a husband who liked to drink a bit, right? That was familiar. My dad liked to drink a bit. So did my husband. My dad, when he was a good man, when he was kind and caring, he was a good man. And same as my husband. And so I fell into a very comfortable rut being married to him. But I knew nothing about alcoholism at that time. I knew nothing about that type of addiction. And so intermittent reinforcement is the best kind of reinforcement. So as a teacher, I know that. So if I do something and sometimes I get reprimanded for it, but if I can do the same thing and not get reprimanded, that builds inside of me an understanding that, well, sometimes this might be okay, and sometimes I might be able to get away with it, right? And that's exactly what happened in my marriage. Because I was of Eastern European descent, it's very patriarchal, right? What the man says is you listen to the man. That's what I learned from my mom. And it got to a point in our marriage after our 2 children were born that I lost who I was. I had no idea who I was. It had been so long since I had smiled. I couldn't remember laughing. I couldn't remember anything fun anymore, anything happy, because the alcoholism got so bad that I did not know from one day to the next what my life would be like. I was constantly walking on eggshells. So, yeah. And so the 12-step program, after we split, saved my life. I would say it saved my life, and maybe my daughter's lives. So I thank God every day for the 12-step program, because it taught me how to live. It taught me how to find myself again and who I was truly meant to be. So,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
beautiful.
Mhm.
It brings back a lot of memories, I guess, for me. I was married to an alcoholic and drug addict for a number of years, and I wasn't able to leave for myself, but I could leave when I had a baby because I couldn't. let the baby grow up in a situation like that. But the situation of not knowing who you were at all, I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I wanted to do. No, I couldn't voice an opinion, right, on anything except probably chocolate. Be because I didn't know who I was anymore, right? And yeah, you just
Exactly.
stay quiet and
Exactly.
try not to get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. And the best secrets are the ones that are never spoken, right? So you don't tell anybody what's going on in the house, whether there's abuse or emotional, physical, verbal. And that, living in my dad's house, being quiet, right? That was in my dad's house, that was safety as a child. Stay quiet, do your work. Don't I always be under the radar. And that became my go-to in my marriage. Stay quiet, always be under the radar. Don't do anything that's going to make him angry, because his anger decided my feelings for that day. And so if he was happy, I was happy. If he was angry, I was afraid. If he was not in the house, I was worried about him, right? And I gave him so much more attention than I gave my own daughters. To this day, I do work with that, like I'm constantly telling my kids, totally, I am so sorry, right? Because if I had known then what I know now about how to raise children, how to be in relationship, it would be totally a different story about how I raised my kids. But I didn't know any better, so I give myself forgiveness, as well as everything in that whole circumstance. You can kind of pull yourself out of that and look at the big picture and see, okay, it's totally understandable that I would fall into a relationship like that. It's totally understandable that with my intermittent reinforcement of his behavior, he would continue his behavior with no boundaries. I had no boundaries. I didn't understand what boundaries were. And so my daughters were 7 and 5 when their dad and I split up. And I'm like you, Carla. I did not want to be the role model for them of how they choose a husband, because
Right.
the generational stuff, you work with generations and ancestral healing. That is so important. I really totally believe that when we can work with ancestral healing, not only do we heal our little idiosyncrasies, we can work with generations before, and we can work with generations after. The Indigenous
Absolutely.
people really believe this. And so I work quite closely with Indigenous people, because where I live in the north here in Northern Canada, we have a large population of Indigenous people that in many cases are really, really hampered uh, by what happened to them and in the generation just before, or in the generation before that, or in the third generation before that. So if we can start healing they believe in 7 generations, right?
Mhm.
7 generations before and 7 generations after, that what we are doing right now on this planet as we walk is affecting all those generations. And
Absolutely.
I believe that too,
Yeah,
the
yeah. That kind of um, is part of what drives me and what I do. The knowledge and and beside the people, it raises the vibration of the whole universe. And it's. I mean, it's just wonderful.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I
it's
agree.
just so awesome.
I agree.
So
Mhm.
so
I
totally.
had a, I didn't have the same experience you ladies did with marriage, and the alcoholism, but I had a very manipulative partner. And you watch, I had a, just want to share real quick. I had a very unique experience yesterday that allowed me to see the plane of the two people that are involved in that manipulation. And it's a silly little maybe story, but it really helped me to realize how I fed into that, and how you were talking about, Fran, you know, how you behaved because of how he behaved. And it was this back and forth relationship. I'm the people pleaser, and my ex-husband was the manipulator, and very, you know, selfish, or whatever you want to call it. And I went yesterday to an Apple store. I've never used an iPhone before, and I had an iPhone, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I walked in, and you kind of scope out who's going to help you. And the gentleman who started to help me, I can feel, you know, their energies and stuff, right? And I could tell kind of how he was right away. And I could tell he didn't really care about, he was kind of annoyed by the questions I was asking, and, you know, just looking around for other things, people to help and whatnot. And so when I started saying, like, oh my gosh, you're so smart, you know all this stuff, and thank you so much for helping me, I just don't know what I'm doing here, then he started to feed into that and was more receptive, or willing to help me. And so I noticed that then it helped me out, right? Because I was getting the help I needed, and he was getting what he kind of wanted, just that gratification, that praise, that thing that made him feel good. And so we had this about 20-minute dance of, I needed some help with this iPhone, and clearly he wasn't interested in helping me, but when I was making him feel good, that's when I got the help that I needed. And I realized what was happening while it was happening. I'm like, this was my marriage. This is so interesting. But obviously I was able to leave the store and leave that behind. So isn't that interesting how so many of us go through that kind of dance with the relationships when we're, you know, not aware of the things that we're doing? It reminded me of that situation that just happened yesterday. So I thought I'd bring that up.
Well, Jessica, deep down, we're all kids, right? We're all kids. And so if you fed his need to be helpful, right? If you were the helpless person and that's what he needed, then of course. But if you had been that person who walked in knowing everything about the iPhone, whatever, 15, he would have been a bit intimidated, right? So he would have looked around to see if he could find someone that he could feel more worthy with, right? So it's all interesting. And as we get older, we understand the dynamics of how people work. And like you said, you knew that there was a dance going on. You could see it. And Carla, I'm sure that you do too in your work, because with me as an educator, I've been an educator for, you know, just about all my life. And you see how children do it, right? You see it in the classroom, or you see it, whatever it is that you're doing. And now that I do hypnotherapy as well, the stories are all different, and yet they're all the same. People are so, you know, the bottom line is we just want to feel loved. We want to feel loved. We want to feel like we belong. We want to feel like part of the tribe. And if we can do that, then we feel accepted and happy, and as though that we're going to be safe. Safety is a big one too. And so we're going to try to find our niche where we feel safe. And for me, that niche was in a relationship with a man who was, he was who he was, but that was comfortable and safe for me because I understood it. I understood that if I am quiet and I stay below the radar, that I'll be safe. Well, sort of safe, but it's up to me, right? And that was my control issue, that I can control this man by being quiet and, you know, under the radar and not standing up for myself, and I can control the situation. What it's really, you can't do that with addictions. You cannot. So those beliefs that I had from my childhood may have worked in a normal marriage, but it did not work in mine because of the addictions that were involved. And I think that's where those of us who come from, there was no addictions in my family. I didn't understand that. My parents were immigrants. There wasn't a lot of extended family around. We didn't have cousins around. We didn't have all of that stuff. You can see uncle getting drunk at the wedding and sliding under the table. I didn't have that in my family of origin. So it was funny when I saw it, but it wasn't funny if I was married to it, right? So it's super interesting. And I think about hypnotherapy and the issues that are presented to me, and lots of times I can tell why they have these issues just from looking at their family of origin. Excuse me.
Yeah. Interesting how it all affects. It affects so much. Like, I was still thinking of what Jessica had said. When I find myself, I guess, where I'm like, when I find myself with a person, like anywhere, it could be in the store, on the street, or our family member or whatever. It's like, because I was manipulated so severely, Jessica, you're probably like that. It's like, I can feel that person. When that person is manipulating me, it might not even hardly come across in their words, but it's like, wow. I mean, it's like, it's I recognize it right away, and perhaps a lot of times maybe I don't handle it as best. It's really, but I don't know. Just lots of flags go up, and that resistance of, no way, you are not doing that to me, right? I am not doing anything you want. Is
Well,
how I react.
and I'm that way too. Like when I take my vehicle to get my vehicle fixed, right? I'm like super suspicious now because, being a woman and taking my vehicle in, and there's usually men that are telling me what I need to get done on my vehicle. It's like I'm super suspicious, and I'll write down everything they say, and then I'll always ask my brothers because I have 6 older brothers, 5 that are still alive. And so it's like, I'll take what you say, but I'm getting always my second opinion, because I don't, I don't trust. I don't trust that they've got my best interest in mind, because I'm so super sensitive now, like you, Carla. I'm super sensitive to what is your underlying intent here. What's your intent here? Because if your intent is to X and O here, whatever it is, right? Really? Seriously. And I might come off as a real hard nosed son of a gun, However, that's the result of what happened back here now. And I'm 62 years old, right? I mean, I don't have to be so mistrustful, and I worked a lot on myself, and yet that's still where I am. It's where, when you get hurt really badly, in a relationship where you truly cared and loved, and you get hurt so badly, you do develop a mistrust, and it takes a long time, maybe a lifetime, to get over that.
Right. What about the 12-step program? Did you find best for you?
I think at the time when I was with my alcoholic husband, I felt so alone. I teach at a Catholic school, right? I teach at a Catholic school. There were probably maybe 4 couples that were married and teachers, and there was lots of, normal relationships, or so I thought. Everybody's just so normal. Nobody had to worry about their husband not coming home at night. Like, there were often times my husband didn't come home at night, stayed out all night. My little girls, they got to the point of not even bothering to get up before they left. I would take them to daycare. They wouldn't even get up and check if dad's in bed. because there were so many nights that he didn't come home. But the secret remained, right? I just did not talk about it. And there were times when I would leave and leave for a couple of days, 2 or 3 at the most, maybe, at one time I left for 6 weeks and took my kids. But nobody knew that I wasn't living at home. And he would always give the promises, right? I'll stop drinking. I promise I'll stop drinking. Just come back. Just bring the kids back. And that many, 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 many times. And so I think what was most helpful about the 12-step program, Al-Anon, I went to Al-Anon, was that they understood. These people at the meeting finally understood, because if I told anybody else, their first response was, Fran, just leave the guy, just leave him. But they didn't understand the complexities, the web of the entanglement. It really was a web of entanglement, because when you live this for your first 17 years of your life, about how husband's in charge, you need to listen, you need to stay under the wire, you need to do whatever's right to just keep this marriage together and make it work. That becomes what you live. And so the entanglements in my marriage were deep. Plus I was Catholic, right? So you're not supposed to get divorced when you're Catholic. Plus I was a teacher. Plus I had all these other external circumstances. So going to the 12-step meeting for the first time and sharing like this was the first time I had really shared about what I was going through. And at that time, one of the meeting members, I always remember this, she was probably my age right now, because I was in my late 30s. And she had brought her husband, who was an AA member. So he was the alcoholic, and she was the Al-Anon member, because Al-Anon is for spouses, partners, parents of someone with an addiction. So she brought him to listen. And after I finished my story, what the man said, that person who was a recovering alcoholic said, he said, yeah, that sounds about right. I would have done all that and more. So it was like, finally somebody understands. Finally, I'm accepted. Finally, I belong, right? Finally, I belong, and I'm mattered, and I'm loved, regardless of the fact that I stayed with this abusive man for so many years. And then you start working the program. You start working the 12 steps, and those in themselves is it's a blueprint for life. Whether or not you've ever had an addiction, or lived with somebody with addictions, or the parent of somebody with addictions, it's a blueprint for life. Because the way it works is, first of all, you surrender. You just admit that your life is out of control. You cannot handle this anymore. That is step number one, to give up control, trying to control the alcoholic, which is impossible. It's impossible. It's like us trying to control the wind, right? We can't control the alcoholic. We can barely control ourselves. So and once you give up that control and say, I can't do it anymore, and then you become willing to let God take over, or whatever your version of God is, right? It doesn't have to be capital G-O-D. It can be the universe. It can be creator. It can be whatever your higher power is. Someone that's going to take care of you for once. It's like, I just can't do it anymore. And there's something magical in that. There's something magical in releasing the need to control, and life starts to change. And it doesn't happen quickly, because there's no way you could handle it if it happened quickly. It happens slowly in small increments. Part of the program is taking an inventory of yourself. So the 4th step is taking an inventory. And so the first time I took an inventory, it was like, yeah, I'll do this. And I started typing it. Like, I was sitting in front of my computer, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to take an inventory of myself for. I don't do anything wrong. And then it was like, I just said that, didn't I? So it's like, okay, number one, I I don't think I do anything wrong. That's a little crazy. But I was already crazy, right? Living with an alcoholic had made me crazy. So then I started saying stuff like, yeah, like I'm super judgmental. Number three, I do things that I wish I hadn't. Number four, and all of this stuff started to come out. All this, the garbage, digging out the garbage in the garbage dump started to just come out. And I'm just crying, typing on my computer of all my faults, all the things that are wrong with me. I'm just crying, but it was very cathartic. And then when I told my sponsor, because in Al-Anon, you have a sponsor, you have somebody that's like making sure you come to meetings, come to meetings, come to meetings. If you don't come to meetings, you're going to slide back right into that cesspool pit again. So my sponsor, she got me to my first meeting, and she made sure that I came to meetings, and she was there with me to share with. And she by this time she knew a lot of my little dirty secrets that I'd never shared with anyone. And so I told her that I had done my 12-step, my 4-step inventory, and she said, Fran, did you write the good things though?
That's what I was going to ask you.
You have to write the good things. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, there's nothing good about me. And she's like, Fran, you have lots of good things about yourself. Go sit down and write them out. And so that took longer. My spirit was so crushed by then that I really could not find anything good about myself. But eventually, over time, it probably took a month of just sitting down and thinking about it. I was able to get kind of an equal list. And then at that point, you share it. You share it with your sponsor or whoever else you really trust. And so that took courage. That took a lot of courage to share all the things that I thought were wrong with me. And then humility. Like, it took humility to actually say the things that were right. Because when you're with an addict, when you're with an alcoholic, it's in their best interest also to make you feel worthless. Because if you feel worthless, you won't leave. You won't make changes. So whether they do it in a conscious or an unconscious way, I don't know, subconsciously, but that's what happened in my relationship. And so, and then all she said was, she just tilted her head like this, and she said, Fran, you're so hard on yourself. And that's all it took, right? For her to say, you're so hard on yourself. To realize, I'm kind of just like anybody else. I'm just an ordinary human that's trying to make their way through life and be the best human I can be, and having lots of events that are complicating that. And because of Al-Anon, I was able to leave him for good. I don't think I would have, right? I don't think I would have left him for good if it hadn't been for Al-Anon, because he had been so used to me coming back. And then he could, the intermittent reinforcement. He could leave for a while, or I could leave for a while. He could stop drinking. I would come back and he would start drinking. So that's intermittent reinforcement, because I always come back. And this time I stayed away because it had to be that you're going to be in a 12-step program yourself. You have to go to AA, to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you have to go faithfully for 6 months before I will come back, before you will be back in this relationship. And he couldn't do it. He didn't do it. So we never did get back together, but I stayed in the program. Yeah.
Yeah, I had gone to Al-Anon also. I'd say I didn't stay in it long enough, probably. I went, I quit probably before the relationship ended, I would say. But even that was helpful. I remember one of the best things was this this little book, an Al-Anon book that had a saying for every day,
Yeah.
and I can't remember the
Yeah.
name of it. It was green. I think they had different ones in different colors, and I read through it for probably 3 years in a row or 4 years in a row, and learned so much each day. My favorite one was something like continuing to hit your head against a brick wall is stupid.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you tie in your hypnotherapy? Do you work with people with the 12-step program, or just yourself with the 12-step program? And how
So
do
the
you
12
use hypnotherapy?
Yeah, the 12-step program is, like I said, a blueprint for life. And I think they have a little booklet called the Blueprint for Life, like the Al-Anon publications have a book called Blueprint for Life. But it helps you to see that in order to really heal, you have to give up control. You have to give up control of what you think should happen and hand it over to God. And so within my hypnotherapy, it's kind of like Al-Anon. In order for people to really feel the benefit of hypnotherapy, they have to give up control. Because if you're only part way there, if you're not sure about this stuff, Fran, I don't know if you can really help me, that I can't help you. You have to believe. You have to believe. And so the people that get the most benefit from hypnotherapy really are at the end of they're at the end of their rope. They don't want, usually they've tried everything. They've tried, the couch therapy, the talk therapy. Often they've tried the self-help books. Often they've tried there's certain programs that you can buy into that come into your inbox all the time. They've tried lots and lots of stuff, and things have not worked because they're only looking at the cover, the cover of the book. They're not digging into the book and finding out what happened first, the antecedent, right? The antecedent that caused the behavior, which caused the consequence. So, for example, if Jessica, if you came to me and you, I don't know, whatever, anxiety, right? If you came to me with high anxiety, as a practitioner, I could say, have you tried antidepressants? Have you tried anti-anxiety meds? Blah blah blah. That's not me, though, right? Because that's surface level. That only cures the symptom. It's the symptom of the anxiety. So you'll numb down anxiety, but you also numb down everything else, because anxiety is only a symptom of something else. So what I will do in hypnotherapy is, under hypnosis, first you have to want it, you have to believe. And so those people that believe it will work are hypnotized easily. Those people that think they weren't hypnotized at all, interestingly, they still get hypnotized, because as soon as it's face to face like this, you've opened that door and allowed me to work. So, so as long as somebody says, I can't be hypnotized, but they actually make the movement to come and be in front of me on a screen or here, yeah, they're giving up control. And then what I do is I hypnotize them, and it's super fast. Hypnotism is so fast. And then we get to the root, right? Just like I had to get to the root of why I married my husband. I got to the root because my father was like that. So then I get to the root of the anxiety. And so I take my clients to a scene, a movie, but I don't know where they're going. They only know where they're going. So it'll be Jessica, you'll be under hypnosis, and then Jessica, I'll take you to a scene that's absolutely relevant crucial and critical to why you have extreme anxiety right now. On the count of 5, I'll count you back, and then I count them back from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll snap my fingers, and they're there. And I'll say, is it daytime or nighttime? And they are there, right? They're in this scene. And sometimes it takes a while to come, right? Depending on their level of how tight they are, right? How tight they are, the secrets that we hold, right? But there's always going to be something. They'll hear a sound, they'll see a light, they'll see something. And eventually this vision of where they are becomes very clear. And they're looking at it as a viewer, as well as seeing themselves. So I can see myself on the screen right now, but I also know that I'm right here. So that's what hypnotherapy is like. I'm watching you. You would be watching yourself in this scene. You can see that you might be 5 years old or 10 years old or 12 years old or 2 years old. And some people even, I know it's me, but I don't recognize this scene, which, it's interesting how the mind works, right? And so I see myself, I'm with my parents, we're on a vacation. My mom tells me not to go in the water, but I don't listen, and I go in the water anyway. And then I'm in the water and I can't feel the ground underneath my feet, and I start to panic. And I know that my mom told me not to go in the water, and I know I'm going to breathe, or I can't breathe, and I'm drowning. And then I say, and then what happens? And then what happens? And because obviously they're here, right? Obviously they didn't drown. What happened next? Oh, what happens next is my dad saw me, and then my dad ran in the water and he rescued me. But there'll be another scene, right? So that's one scene. And then there'll be another scene of where they came super close to something happening to them because they didn't obey. Because they didn't obey their parent, or because they didn't do what the teacher said to do. They didn't do, because they chose not to. And then the third scene, very similar, different ages, similar. And now they present themselves at 23 years old, and their anxiety is through the roof. They can't, it's hard enough just to get outside their house. Going to Costco to shop is impossible, right? Those kind of anxieties. It's like, okay, you see in one hand that you had this event in the water and another event and another event, and now you're presenting with extreme anxiety. Do you see the link now? Of course they see the link. Of course they do, because they're looking with an adult set of eyes now. So it's super interesting how that works too, because in the scene, they can see how they're flapping around with their arms in the water, and they're going to drown if their dad doesn't come and help them. But it's not like it's not like they're in the seat or in front of me as an adult. They're not drowning, but they can see themselves. And so it's not as horrific, as traumatic as the first experience is. And just even that itself, because it's not as traumatic, they can see, oh yeah, my dad was right there. He was right there on the shore. He could see me. It wasn't like I was going to drown. I was not going to drown. My dad was right there. So even seeing that from the bird's eye view helps them to understand the whole relationship with high anxiety and how I got here. And then what I do is I reframe it. It's a reframing process where having anxiety is never going to hold you back again. Never again will anxiety hold you back. You are confident, you are strong, you are capable, and you will save yourself. You will save yourself. And then I give them a recording, which is all about the wonderful things that they want to be able to do. It's like if they've told me that they want to go to university and get a university degree, and they want to travel to Australia and live in Australia for a year, those are the kinds of things that I'll say in the recording. I'll say, you love your life, without a shadow of a doubt that that you are so confident you can do all the things that you set your mind to. And one of those things that you're setting your mind to is traveling to Australia. And you know now that traveling to Australia would be so easy for you because you've made that commitment and you know that you're strong, you're capable. And not only that, you deserve to go to Australia. You know, those kinds of things I'll say in the recording. And then you listen to the recording for 21 days and it changes a mindset. It does change the mindset. So with hypnotherapy, like the miracles that I've seen, I can't even describe them. I don't know, because it's not me. It's God. It's God that's doing this. It's not me. I'm just the person who's in front of the screen. I'm just the person who's helping that client work through their own stuff. It's their own stuff, but God gives me the words to say. Like, I give the credit to him or her or the universe or whatever,
Right.
whoever's running the show. I know it's not me. I'm not running the show.
I have found hypnotherapy very helpful too, and I like to combine it. So, like, I do my work, the biofield tuning, and then I also, um, I mean, I either tune myself or receive it from other people, and then I also receive hypnotherapy. So I'm clearing the old and allowing new in, and then the hypnotherapy plugs in the new. Is how I like to use it, and
Yeah,
it's very
yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, Jessica, you would be interested in this too because I hypnotized a lady one time, and she knew her stuff. She was a healer as well, so she knew how the body keeps the score. Bessel van der Kolk talks about how the body keeps the score. Whatever happened back then it has an impact. The emotional stuff has an impact on the physical stuff, and so she knew that she had breast cancer, and she was not going to she had decided she was not going to get it removed surgically. She was not going to get chemo. She's in her late 60s. She was not going to do all of that because she knew the body keeps a score, and she knew also that she had not forgiven yet. She had not done some forgiveness work that needed to be done in order for herself to be healed. And so she and I had a session together. I led her to whatever scenes her subconscious brought up, and she was able to see the bird's eye view of everything. And then one of the techniques that I use is talk to the perpetrator. Only if the client wants to talk to the perpetrator, though. So in this case, she did. She wanted to talk to the perpetrator because she knew she had to forgive him. And so it's a bit of Gestalt therapy where the empty chair is in front of you, but you see that person in front of you. You are totally talking with that person. And so that man was in front of her, and she was able to say all the things she wanted to say about how wrong it was, how he mistreated her. She trusted him. He mistreated her, and all the stuff that had gone along with that. And then she was able to say, but I forgive you because I know that you had been abused yourself. You had been mistreated, and I do forgive you. And I'm talking her through this. I'm saying, what does he say now? And she would tell me he's saying this. And then what do you say? And then because I was like the person in the empty chair, right? You did this, this, and this, but I understand and I forgive you. And so that was about 7 months ago. So I got a hold of her about a month ago to ask her, what's the size of the tumor now? Like, how are things going? I often check in, how are things going? But I wanted to see because she didn't know until she had her CT scan or the ultrasound or whatever you get after 6 months. And she said, Fran, it's half the size. So
Wow.
there's so much power in that, right? There's so much power in forgiveness. Like, yeah, incredible stuff.
Oh, for sure. So, what did you teach when you were teaching? Or like now you said you work with teachers like before they become teachers or before, right? And so what is it that you teach them?
Okay, so my pre-service teachers are in their second or third year of the teaching program. So they're attending the University of Alberta, which is a very well-known university here. And they are in the Indigenous teaching program. So they are wherever they're located. Last year when I taught the course, I had a student who was in Manitoba, one in the Yukon territories, one that was actually in Montana, and they're online, but they're all part of the same cohort. So what I'm teaching has an Indigenous slant to it. So I'm teaching them how to be a homeroom elementary teacher, because basically when you're an elementary teacher, you're homeroom. But in the LA, I'm teaching them how to teach language arts, which is reading, writing, speaking, viewing, all of the language arts. So, but it's got an Indigenous slant. But you see, because there's been so much trauma, there's so much trauma. And I'm not speaking just for Indigenous people, I'm speaking for everyone. But the trauma that Indigenous people have undergone in Canada because of colonialism, it's heavy. It's a heavy, heavy experience. And just the fact that they are in this teaching program says mile. It's part of recovery, right? It's part of their own recovery. And so because I have my background in elementary education, academically I'm qualified. Like I did this for my career, is to teach people how to read and write and all of that. But for them, because they're Indigenous and they've got that trauma related background, and it might not be the person that's in front of me that's holding, not them, but they've had DNA with trauma in it, right? Extreme trauma. And I believe it's carried in the DNA. They're more susceptible. Like they're so much more susceptible to other trauma in whatever ways, so because I'm a hypnotherapist, because I've had the 12-step program, I have a way better understanding of how trauma affects people, not just children, but adults too, but in particularly children. So in a classroom full of children, so say there's 25 kids, most of the girls, I would say a large percentage of the girls, have had some type of, emotional, perhaps sexual. I'm not going to go out on a limb there and say that, but there has been something that they have seen. And that is in any classroom in the world. I'll tell you that right now. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a Northern Alberta classroom or an Indigenous classroom or anywhere. It's anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's a huge percentage of women.
Huge. And boys too. But there's also those other factors about what's happening in the home. What's happening in the home between mom and dad, if dad is there, or caretakers or grandparents or whoever is looking out for these kids, right? Whoever is caring for these kids. And 0 to 7 are the most important years, like 0 to 7. That's where the imprinting starts, imprinting on children about how to behave properly, what is expected or what's not expected, or what I can do to get some attention in this family, how I can behave in order to get attention. And so a large part of the work that I do with my pre-service teachers is to do inner healing work. They don't know it's inner healing work. They think it's for the child, like their children in their classroom. But when I sit down in front of them and I give them a new technique, like one of the techniques I like to use just for myself is called shift. And I taught this to my students, my previous service teachers last year, because shift works with your inner child. So your number one, S, shift starts with an S. Be sensitive. Be sensitive to what's going on in your body. You've got a stomach ache. Okay. Okay. Understandable. Headache. Understandable. Something, shoulder, whatever it is. Be sensitive to what's going on in the body. Intuit. I or H. H is hear. Hear it. So in order to hear, you have to actually ask, right? So you ask that part of your body, gee, stomach, you're a little bit upset right now. What's going on with you? And you hear, it'll tell you, Fran, I'm a little anxious about this podcast. I'm coming on this podcast and I'm a little anxious. So I heard my stomach, right? Intuit. Oh, right. You have this podcast coming up. So you're feeling anxiety because of this podcast. That's totally understandable. So you empathize, you sympathize with whatever part of your body that's giving you a problem right now, right? You sympathize with it, you empathize with it, you intuit. F is you feel it, right? Okay, I know that you're upset right now. I feel it. I understand. I know. And I, as an adult or whatever, I get this way too. If I'm talking to my inner child, I'm saying, yeah, you used to be so afraid to speak in public. I get it. When I was a kid, because I wanted to stay under the wire, I did not speak in public. I did not raise my hand in class. That was not me. So anytime I would have to read, like, that person reads and that person and that person and that person, and you come to me and I'm supposed to read, I was a good reader. But when it came to me, I was a speed reader. It was like, get this paragraph over and move on, right? So, I say to my inner child, I get it. I understand. I know how hard it is for you. I know. I know. And I'm here for you. And then T is the shift in T is talk to it, turn it around and give it up to God. Take it up to God. So, Fran, I know this is what you used to feel like when you're a kid. You're not a kid anymore. You can do this. I believe in you. And God can take it from here. And you just send it up. And so I taught this shift to my students online, and they got it. They understood. And so one of the amazing things after teaching adults, because I didn't see this in my classroom life. It was way too busy. But teaching adults is like you see the light bulb come on immediately. You see the light bulb come on. Oh, right. That kind of awareness. But as adults, there's a lot of history that has to be worked through. And anybody who comes from a childhood where there's emotional trauma, any kind of a trauma, it's work, and you have to stay with it, because if you don't work with it, it turns into something else. It'll turn into an addiction. It'll turn into abuse of another person, right? It'll turn into suicide. It'll turn into, physical ailments. If you don't do the work, it'll become something else, because that emotion needs to be released. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so very, very true. Well, Fran, we're about at our hour here of the podcast. Is there something you'd like to leave with us? A last thought or a last something, or perhaps something you offer for others that, in case someone here would like that?
Yeah, they can always get a hold of me at my website, inhaletherapy.com, or email me directly, Fran@inhaletherapy.com. But I want you to know that you're not alone. Like, everybody's got problems. Everybody. And it doesn't matter if you're the richest person on the planet or the poorest person on the planet. Everybody's got problems. You are not alone. You belong, you matter, you are loved, and there is help out there. There is. Reach out to me, reach out to Carla or Jessica. We're here to help you. That's what our mission is. That's what our mission is. We're here to help.
That's beautiful, Fran. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all the viewers for our podcast. And please like and subscribe if you haven't already to help others find us more. So with that, we'll catch you next week.
Thank you.